Happy holidays, and for the holiday season we're going to give you 12 terrifying real true stories that have been recorded in the news, in papers or online. So starting first with the Axe Murder House. The Villisca Axe Murder House in Villisca, Iowa is a well-known tourist attraction for ghost hunters and horror lovers alike. The site of a gruesome unsolved 1912 murder in which 6 children and 2 adults had their skulls completely crushed by the axe of an unknown perpetrator was purchased in 1994, restored to its 1912 condition and converted to a tourist destination. It costs $420 a night to stay at the old haunted home, where visitors can always report strange paranormal experiences, such as visions of a man with an axe roaming the halls or faint screams of children. But in November of 2014, the haunting took a darker turn. Robert Stephen Lawson Jr., 37, of Wisconsin, was on a regular recreational paranormal visit with friends and true horror struck. His companions found him stabbed in the chest, an apparently self-inflicted wound. Called 911 and Lawson was brought to a nearby hospital before being helicoptered to the Creighton University Medical Center in Omaha. The Montgomery County Sheriff's Office said Lawson suffered the self-inflicted injury at about 12:45 a.m., which is about the same time the 1912 axe murders in the house began. Lawson recovered from his injuries, but has never spoken publicly about what occurred that day. For Martha Lynn, the owner of the home, the incident was very upsetting. It's publicity, but not exactly the kind of publicity you desire to have. I don't want people thinking that when they come to the Axe Murder House, something's going to happen that's going to make them do something like that. The house remains open for tourist visits and overnight stays today. When you think of haunted dolls, it's likely the creepy old Victorian-looking porcelain kind that springs to mind, none of which you probably have lying around. Still, don't get too comfortable around any kids' toys as well. A Disney Frozen Elsa doll that was gifted for Christmas in 2013 in the Houston area made headlines when it seemingly became haunted. According to the Houston News, the doll recited phrases from the movie Frozen and sang "Let It Go" when a button on its necklace was pressed. For 2 years it did that in English. The mother said in 2015 it started doing it between Spanish and English. There wasn't a button that changed these, it was just random. The family has owned this doll for more than 6 years and never changed its batteries. The mother said the doll would randomly begin to speak and sing even when the switch was turned off. The family decided to throw the old creepy doll out in December of 2019. Weeks later, they found it inside a bench in their living room. The kids insisted they didn't put it there, and I believe them because they wouldn't have dug through the garbage outside, the mother told Houston News. At that point, Elsa ceased to sing the English rendition of "Let It Go" altogether, speaking only in Spanish when pressed. The family then double-bagged the bizarre doll and placed it at the bottom of their garbage, which was taken out on garbage day. They went on a trip shortly after, but when they returned, Elsa too had come back and was waiting in the backyard of their home. This time, the family mailed Elsa to a family friend in Minnesota, who'd take the haunted doll to the front bumper of his truck. It doesn't seem to have made its way back to Houston yet. As the mother said, latest February update on the creepy doll. When the Bretzus family decided to insulate their home in Auburn, Pennsylvania in 2015, they discovered that it already had been, with scores of dead animal carcasses. As Fox News reported, the dead animals were wrapped in newspapers from the 1930s and 40s and were among half-used spices and other items. After removing the items, they sent hundreds of artefacts and carcasses to an expert in Cudstown. The expert attributed the rotting animals in their walls to powwow or Dutch magic, a ritual originating in the culture of the Pennsylvania Dutch to treat ailments and gain physical and spiritual protection. The Pennsylvania Dutch were a group of German-speaking settlers to Pennsylvania in the 1600s and 1700s, and are often Lutheran, Mennonite, or Amish faiths. The Washington Post notes on the magic, many of the spells deal with the care of livestock finding water or of the treatment of minor ailments, reflecting the conditions and concerns of early American settlers. But powwow also has within a tradition of darker spells, of even such things as conjuring demons. One notable ritual in their tradition is this hex to create loyalty in a dog, to attach a dog to a person, provided nothing else was used before to effect it. Try to draw some of your blood, let the dog eat it along with his food, and he will stay with you. The mould found in the rotting carcasses in the Bretzus home has caused illness amongst the family members, and they say even once the carcasses were removed, the odour never left the house. Eliza Lamb was last seen on January 31st, 2013, in the lobby of the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. She was vacationing through the West Coast, documenting the trip on her blog and checking in with her parents every day. On January 31st, these calls stopped. Lamb had vanished. Soon the police were involved, and her parents arrived with the help of the search. They found nothing, but that February, LAPD released elevator surveillance footage of Lamb before her disappearance. The footage shows Lamb behaving strangely in the elevator, appearing to talk with invisible people, peering around the corner of the door, crouching in the corner, opening and closing the door. But what exactly is going on in this video raises more questions than answers. Theories range from psychotic episodes to demonic possession to unknown assailants just outside the camera's view. Around that time, hotel guests started reporting weird things happening with the Cecil Hotel water supply. As CNN reports, the shower was awful, said Sabina Ball, who spent 8 days there during the investigation. When you turned the tap on, the water was coming black first for 2 seconds, then it was going back to normal. The tap water tasted horrible, Ball said. It had a very funny, sweety, disgusting taste. It's a very strange taste. I could barely describe it. But for a week they never complained. We never thought anything of it, she said. We thought it was just the way it was here. On the morning of February 19, a hotel employee climbed to the roof and used a ladder to investigate the hotel's water storage tanks. That's where authorities found the decomposing, naked body of Lamb, whose personal items were found nearby. After an autopsy, her death was labelled accidental. NBC Los Angeles reported it at the time about the strange circumstances in the hotel's past. The tank has a metal latch that can be opened, but authorities said access to the roof is secured with an alarm and a lock. The single-room occupancy hotel has an unusual history. Night stalker Richard Ramirez, who was found guilty of 14 slayings in the 1980s, lived on the 14th floor for several months in 1985. An international serial killer, Jack Unterweger, is suspected of murdering 3 prostitutes during the time he lived there in 1991. He killed himself in jail in 1994. In 1962, a female occupant jumped out of one of the hotel's windows, killing herself and a pedestrian on whom she landed. In February 2021, a Netflix documentary called Crime Scene: The Vanishing of the Cecil Hotel explored Eliza's tragic case and the history of the cursed Cecil Hotel. In 2007, ABC's News documented a series of cell phone calls to families with terrifyingly specific death threats. The unidentified callers knew exactly what families were doing and what they were wearing. The families say calls come in at all hours of the night, threatening to kill their children, their pets, and grandparents. Voicemails arrive playing recordings of their private conversations, including one with a local police detective. The caller knows, the family says, what they're wearing and what they're doing, and after months of investigating, police seem powerless to stop them. This went on with the Kuykendall family for months, who reported a caller with a scratchy voice threatening to slit their throats. When the police tried to find the culprit, the calls were traced back to their own phones, even when they were turned off. It got worse. The Kuykendalls and 2 other families told ABC News that they believe the callers are using their cell phones to spy on them. They say the hackers know their every move, where they are, what they're doing, and what they're wearing. The callers have recorded private conversations, the family police said, including a meeting with a local detective. No source of the phone stalkers were ever found. This story was told to Derek Hayes, host and creator of Monsters Among Us, a podcast where guests share their unearthly experiences. And one was a caller called Jacqueline. It's called The Imaginary Friend. Jacqueline's from Oklahoma and said that while her memories have faded over the years, she remembers having an imaginary friend of her own when she was young. Her grandparents, Granny Jimmy and Pa Hank, lived in a small home with a quiet backyard. Jacqueline recalls visiting them as a child and making daisy chains out of dandelions while sitting beneath a big tree. I have very good memories of my Pa Hank, Jacqueline said on the podcast. He would sit under the tree with me and tell me stories. The stories were often about his life and memories of prohibition. He was actually a very interesting character, she said. I have some cool stories that I'm grateful I got to have. The only problem? Her grandfather died in 1981 and Jacqueline was born in 1982. I don't think I ever realised I was getting stories from a ghost, she said, adding that the rest of the family was aware of his presence in the house. My Granny Junie would never stay in the house on the anniversary of his death, she said. He did die in the house. Jacqueline also recalls Pa Hank get up in the middle of the night when she was staying in the house. It never occurred to me that these were memories of an entity, she said. In hindsight, Jacqueline said that even though her childhood imaginary friend was actually her dead grandfather, it cast a different light because it was a relative and not a stranger. It never felt like ghosts, It felt like talking to my Pa Hank. This story, The Kidnapping Ghost, was also told on the podcast Monsters Among Us and was from a caller called Joe. In 1998, he relocated from California to Georgia to work as a manager for an auto body shop with his cousin. Soon after, Joe's brother followed him to the Peach State and rented a small house built in the late 1800s. It looked nice from the outside, but it did not feel good from the inside, Joe said on the podcast. Things were off the moment he helped his brother move into the house. I walked into the house and went, oh man, the hair just stood up at the back of my neck, and I just felt ill at ease, like this place wasn't cool at all, he said. Moments later, while carrying items into the bedroom, Joe said he heard whispering, a heated whispering, almost like an argument between two people that seemed to be hovering in the top of the ceiling area of the room, he added. Joe ran out of the room and asked his brother if he felt something off about the house. His brother had picked up on the vibe, but after praying on it, his brother said he felt that things would be all right. As long as you're good, Joe said. I'm not good, but I'm going to help you, and I'm going home, and I probably won't come back to this house. In the weeks that followed, there were more unusual occurrences, including a terrifying event in which Joe's 8-year-old nephew was taking a bath and sat up to find an elderly man in the tub with him. It took about 2 days to calm him down, and he never took baths after that, Joe said. After falling asleep on the couch one night, Joe's brother awoke to find an elderly man and woman seated on either side of him, arguing back and forth over whether or not they were going to allow their brother and his family remain in the home. The kicker, however, was when Joe's brother asked to borrow his truck one afternoon after receiving word that his 4-year-old daughter had been found wandering along a busy road by herself with a hand up in the air. Police and other agencies were called in to investigate, and when asked, the 4-year-old explained that she'd just gone for a walk with the old lady. What old lady? Joe's brother asked. The old lady that lives here, his daughter replied. She just wanted to go for a walk, so we went for a walk. The front door was far too heavy for a 4-year-old, so everyone was perplexed how she was able to leave the house. The old lady opened the door. Then we petted the dog for a little bit, then went for a walk, she explained. She was so genuine and honest at 4 years old that he couldn't call her a liar. Shortly after, his brother moved out of the house and never went back. Joe still drives by the house nearly every day. It looks like a perfectly normal, acceptable house, except for what's inside. Another story, as told on the podcast Monsters Among Us, was from a caller called Julie, a resident from Portland, Oregon. And she said in the 1990s, she was driving out to the city to meet with friends when she found herself in traffic. The 18-year-old soon discovered that the cause of the slowdown was due to a dreadful car crash, and to her horror, as she passed the scene, she realised that someone had died. A moment later, there was a woman sitting in my passenger seat, Julie told Hayes on Monsters Among Us. Though she admits it sounds crazy, Julie said she could see a woman dressed in work clothes seated next to her. Though she was in complete shock, the woman in the passenger seat was even more freaked out. She looked like somebody who'd just ended up in someone else's car, Julie said. Panicked, the woman demanded to know how she got there and who Julie was. It was then that Julie noticed the woman had an unearthly quality about her and realised that whoever she passed on the side of the road was somehow in the car with her. Ma'am, you need to calm down. My name is Julie and I'm here to help, she told the stranger. Julie later on went to explain to the woman that she'd been in a car accident and somehow ended up in her passenger seat. The woman was stricken. At that exact moment, they passed a clearing in the trees. With some encouragement from Julie, the woman peacefully walked towards the sun, then disappeared. In complete disbelief, Julie pulled over and convinced herself she had imagined the whole thing. Several days later, however, a story came on the news about a trucker injured in a car accident. Before they finished, they threw a picture up of the woman that was in my car and explained that she'd passed away in the accident, Julie said on the podcast. It was unbelievable. It was really too much. The Eerie Attic is a true scary story about a woman who hears strange noises at night that seem to be coming from overhead. As time goes by, she comes to believe that there's a ghost in the house. This is also known as the Jackie Hernandez haunting and the San Edro poltergeist. It was featured in an episode of the TV show Paranormal Witness. There was a woman named Jackie who lived in a rented bungalow house with her 2-year-old son Jamie and her baby daughter Samantha. About a month after she moved in, she began hearing strange noises that sounded like they were coming from the attic. She tried to ignore them, but every time she heard the unexplained noises, it sent a chill down her spine. One night she noticed that the trapdoor that led to the attic was hanging open. She'd never opened it and had no idea what was in the attic. She was too scared to go up and investigate, so she just closed the trapdoor again. She had the strangest feeling that she was not alone in the house. Jackie hired a 16-year-old girl named Tina to babysit her children. One day when they were in the kitchen, they noticed weird glowing lights floating around near the trapdoor in the ceiling. Jackie grabbed her camera and told the babysitter to take some pictures. As soon as Tina looked through the camera lens, she saw something that terrified her. She screamed in horror and dropped the camera, and both of them ran out of the house in fear for their lives. The babysitter said what she had seen was the ghostly image of an old man with a face that looked like a skeleton. One day she went shopping. When she came home, she walked into the kitchen and found something creepy on the refrigerator. The magnetic letters of the alphabet on the fridge door had been rearranged to read "Get the hell out." It unnerved her so much that she couldn't sleep, and she spent the night awake watching over her children. In the middle of the night, she heard what sounded like loud breathing. She went down the hallway looking for the source of the noise. When she opened the door to the spare bedroom, she recoiled in horror. What she saw was an old man sitting on her son's bed. Jackie was so terrified that she grabbed her kids and ran out of the house. She couldn't afford to move out of the house, and she was worried that if she told anyone what was going on, that they would think she was out of her mind. The next day she was in the kitchen washing the dishes, and she noticed that her rubber gloves were covered in blood. She pulled off the gloves, but there were no cuts on her hands. Then she looked around and saw blood pouring down the kitchen walls. That night, Jackie woke up in the middle of the night and she felt someone holding her down. She couldn't get up and she couldn't breathe. She thought she was going to die. Suddenly, it let her go. She grabbed her kids and ran out of the house. That was the last straw. She couldn't take it anymore. She called in a team of paranormal investigators and asked them to find out what was going on in her house. The next evening, the investigators arrived with their equipment. They set up cameras all over the house, and Jackie told them all the supernatural events that she had experienced. All of a sudden, the lights went out. They suspected that whoever or whatever was haunting the house, it was angry the investigators were there. When the lights came back on, one of the investigators decided to go up in the attic and take some pictures. He climbed up through the trapdoor, and the rest of the team waited for him to come back down. All of a sudden they heard a scream coming from the attic. The investigator fell through the trapdoor and claimed that something had grabbed his camera. Just then they heard the sound of someone walking around in the attic, even though there was nobody up there. The investigators recovered their camera and left. Two other investigators decided to go up into the attic with a flashlight and another camera. The rest of the team waited in the kitchen. All of a sudden they heard a loud snap, and the investigators in the attic started yelling and screaming. When they came back down, one of them was choking and gasping for air, and he had red marks around his throat. They said something had attacked them in the attic. When they looked at the pictures on the camera, they were horrified by what they found. In one picture, one of the investigators had an old rope around his neck like a noose, and he looked like he was being choked. Jackie and the team of investigators ran out of the house screaming. After that, Jackie refused to spend another night in the house. She gathered her children and moved out. Since then, the house has been rented to other people, but none of them stay very long. To this day, everyone involved in the case is still haunted by what happened in the attic. The scariest thing about this story is that it is true. It happened in San Pedro, California in 1989, and the woman's name was Jackie Hernandez. Outside of St. Louis lies Zombie Road, a hotbed of ghostly activities. There are many scary stories stemming from Lawler Ford Road, its actual name, from sightings of Indigenous spirits wandering the stretch to victims of train accidents, as there used to be active tracks there, like Della Hamilton McCulloch, who was struck by a passing train. In the 1950s, it became a popular late-night teen hangout spot, with various murders happening in the area too. It's also been rumoured to be the home base of a murderer named Zombie, who escaped a mental asylum. These days, the stretch has been rechristened as a nature trail, but it's closed once night falls, and there's actual hefty fines for those who dare to trespass by the police. This story is called The Possessed Children, and it happened in Indianapolis. And the Indianapolis Star published a lengthy report on a family terrorised by 3 children allegedly possessed by demons. The account of Latoya Amons and her family tells disturbing stories of children climbing up the walls, getting thrown across rooms, and children threatening doctors in deep, unnatural voices. It would seem like something out of a movie, a work of fantasy, except all these accounts were more or less corroborated with nearly 800 pages of official records obtained by the Indianapolis Star and recounted in more than a dozen interviews with police, docs personnel, psychologists, family members, and a Catholic priest. One of the more chilling sections of the report includes a segment about the possessed 9-year-old. According to the Washington Original Docs report, an account corroborated by Walker, the nurse, the 9-year-old had a weird grin and walked backward up a wall to the ceiling. He then flipped over Campbell, landing onto his feet. He never let go of his grandmother's hand. Another segment of the piece reads, the 12-year-old would later tell mental health professionals that she sometimes felt as if she was being choked and held down so she couldn't speak or move. She said she heard a voice say that she'd never see her family again and wouldn't live another 20 minutes. From Jason Ghost Hunter, we wish you a very Merry Christmas and a spectacular New Year. Hope you enjoyed the creepy stories. See you soon.